to the latest edition of IoT Leaders with me, Nick Earle, CEO of Eseye. And IoT Leaders is a podcast series that attempts to demystify IoT and give you, the listeners, guidance in how to make successful IoT deployments and the impact that they can have on business models. And in this episode, the world, because I'm delighted to welcome Nick Hughes to the podcast. And Nick has got a great track record in the IoT business going back quite a while. We'll explore that in a minute. Really in three main areas. First of all, from when working with Vodafone, was the creator of a mobile money payment system called M-PESA, which is now used across Africa in particular. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then created co-founder of M-KOPA, which is a system with IoT system that's delivering value to more than 1 million people, 1 million customers across Africa based on IoT. And if that wasn't enough, Nick has now founded a new venture called 4R Digital, which takes the M-KOPA model to a completely different level. And I think as you listen to this, one of the questions that will go through your mind, and it certainly went through my mind, is this IoT? Is this giving back to the community? Is it a for-profit enterprise? Is it all of the above? But actually, it almost sounds like it's a financial services company. And so it is just really interesting, the business model that Nick is able to implement. So Nick, with that big build-up, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Thanks. World changing. I'm not sure about that, but it's.
Well, I don't know. I don't think we'll let the audience judge that one. I think it is. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
I mean, can we start perhaps on the mobile payment side? I mean, M-PESA is a huge success.
Yes.
It is widely used. Maybe you could just start off with the story of you were working with Vodafone, and how did that all come about?
Yeah, sure. I joined Vodafone in 2001, and Vodafone at the time was growing like crazy. It had gone from a UK FTSE 100 company up to this global player as it acquired network operators all over the world. And I joined with a brilliant job, actually. My job was to help find applications of mobile technology which had a sort of positive impact, or potentially a positive impact, on reputation. And cutting a very long story short, in just after the 2001-2002 period when I joined, the what were called the Millennium Development Goals then. We now know them as the Sustainable Development Goals, but the Millennium Development Goals were a hot topic, and big companies were trying to sort of work out what's the role of the private sector in addressing some of these development challenges. And we managed to we were doing all sorts of stuff around telemedicine, and we were doing improved accessibility to telco services. But one project which started to move really quickly was looking at financial inclusion. Can we use mobile technology to allow people that have been excluded from financial services to give them greater access? And interestingly, with the support of some grant money actually from DFID, who are now FCDO, we kicked off a project in Kenya where Vodafone had a subsidiary called Safaricom, and Safaricom is a big and successful telco in Africa. And working with the management team there in Safaricom, we started knocking around a few ideas, and then started realizing, well, actually, we can use phones to move money between A and B, and so we built a mobile wallet system. I'm summarizing about 6 years of my life
because it's not easy, and I'm sure it was
easy. But today, and that product became M-PESA, and today M-PESA generates, I think if it's not the biggest, it's very close to it now, but it's the major driver of revenue for Safaricom. So you've got a telco actually pulling revenue in a very significant way from an adjacent sector, which is financial services, and in fact all over the world now. Many systems that look like M-PESA have come through, and the technology has changed, of course, and we've all got smartphones. And, and interestingly, we're in Europe, we all now use phones for payments, but we were doing that 15 years ago
in the day
in Africa. Yeah. And so anyway, it grew into a very big business, and and it still is. M-PESA it is literally used by tens of millions of people in Africa every day. But for me, what became really interesting was, once you can move a little bit of money between A and B at a very low cost, you can start to sort of edge into other business areas, and out of that came M-KOPA, where
and that's where I wanted to move into, because on its own, you could argue that M-PESA, which is a fantastic success and congratulations, it is not an IoT story. It's a financial payment story for people with very low income, $2 a day or whatever, but they have mobile phones. It's amazing. But it does have very, very direct relevance to IoT, and in particular, how you change business models. And one of the themes that we've always had in these podcasts is it's not about the technology, it's about the creation of previously unimaginable business models, things that perhaps you could imagine them, but you couldn't figure out how to implement them. And M-KOPA is a great example of that. And so let's transition into that, because I know M-PESA is part of it, but M-KOPA is a much bigger play. And again, became a really big company. So let's talk about what happened next in terms of M-KOPA.
Thanks. So M-KOPA is now 8 years old, and we built the business around using two big levers: mobile payments, so the ability to move a little bit of money around off a phone, and to do that at very low cost. And then connectivity, as you say, and this is where Eseye helped us in the very early days figure out this technology that we needed. So we changing tack slightly. If you take a step back and look at Africa, around 600 million people do not have access to grid power, or if they do get access to grid power, it's very unreliable, and yet we can use connectivity and payments to change that business model. And so what we've done in M-KOPA, we created some distributed solar equipment. So it's a solar panel down into a battery, lithium ion batteries. You can use LED lights, low power TVs, and you can create small standalone power systems. And inside that hardware, we put connectivity, and that's where Eseye helped us tremendously in the first few years. You put a modem and a SIM, so that bit of equipment, when it's anywhere in the world, you can see it digitally, you can remotely control it, and you can turn it on and off. And then because I could turn it on and off, I could use mobile payments as a mechanism to allow people to buy that equipment using small payments. So think of it a little bit like a coin in the meter model. The coin is actually an M-PESA payment. The meter is some connectivity inside the hardware. And so we're able to then say, give us a deposit to the customers, take this product home, install it. You have your own power system in your house, and you're paying for it in small increments. Of course, if you don't pay us, we can turn it off, and it's there's lots of software in there to protect the asset against hacking. And we didn't really see much of that at all. In fact, customers sort of, great, I can now afford to get good quality, clean energy at a daily price, rather than having to save up a few $100s and buy that kit. And so it is actually, when it looks like an energy company, but actually it's financial services. We are using digital payments to finance some hardware. And that's that. I think that's the secret of its success. And it's, as you say, we've now got 1 million customers in East Africa, and it's, and it's growing into, we've grown into TVs and fridges. And
there's so much to talk about. So let's unpack it, as they say, and just make it. So I'm a villager in Africa, and I'm not on the grid, or the grid's unreliable or whatever. So, but we're able to bring power through solar in the device, because there's plenty of sunshine, but there's not plenty of reliable electricity. So talk me through how I could use this as somebody in a village in Africa.
Yeah, sure. So typically you'd be spending some of your disposable income, which, by the way, is highly variable. Maybe we work in small business, or you've got your own farm, or you work in agriculture, and your income is quite spiky and variable. You're probably not being offered banking services in the way you and I
don't qualify for the credit check. I'm below the radar of the banks.
Yeah, it's sort of almost invisible to banks, really. So you don't have a credit record. But so what we say, but you have managed to get yourself a phone, and you've managed to register for an M-PESA account. Of there's plus 40 million people registered for M-PESA in Kenya alone. And so you have an ability to move a little bit of money around off your phone once you can load cash into that wallet. And so, one of our sales guys or girls would have no doubt been to your village and done we've probably got a shop somewhere within. We have 70 or 80 locations across Kenya where we have products on display. But it's all about displacing that daily cost that you would spend on kerosene or paraffin, or perhaps you enough money to run a small diesel generator for your own sort of business or house. Those are costly things. In terms of their capex, but also their ongoing cost. So our proposition is put a deposit down, and that could be somewhere between $20 and $30, which is an important screen because it gets cut. We know then that the customer is committed.
It's serious. Yeah, they're committed. Yeah.
So there's some money down. They take the product home, and it's a very simple. On the outside, it's a very simple product. It's you put a solar panel and you put that on your roof, and you can move it in and out if you're moving away or you're going overnight. You want to bring it in, but it charges up a battery.
Right.
And that battery is then used to power, charge your phone, power your lights.
USB slots on it.
USB sockets. Yeah, you can put in a low power TV. We're even running fridges off these power systems now, because actually the technology in battery storage has come on leaps and bounds in recent years, largely driven by the EV market. And maybe when we get to 4 Hour Digital, we can talk about electric vehicles. It's another story. But
we're getting there. Yeah.
So we have affordable solar power, PV panels, photovoltaic panels, affordable battery storage, energy storage, low power appliances, lights, TVs, fridges. And then what we've done is put some software in there that controls that according to payments received. Now, of course, we need to connect that hardware up, and that's where we use Eseye SIMs. You guys help us with the connectivity. So if you think there are 3 pieces to the equation here, you've got a bit of kit in someone's house remotely. You've got to connect that and bring information and data back to a cloud services, and then we run an accounts management system which tracks the payments received from that customer. And so you've got those 3 pieces: the hardware, the cloud services, and then our account management system, which is basically running the lending product that we've offered.
And it's interesting you say that as the lending product, because I know certainly when we started helping you with this journey, we were helping you with the hardware design. It was an engineering problem. How do I do this? How do I remotely access it? How do I make it reliable? Yeah. And then this ability to turn it on or off depending on the customer's record.
Yeah.
Yes, there was an aha at some point where, or maybe you had the brilliant vision all the way along, but sometimes the companies end up with something they discovered along the journey as opposed to right from day one.
Yeah, true.
So you found yourself with credit history information for people who don't have bank accounts.
Yes.
That must have been a big aha.
Yeah, really. And you're right. The very start of that journey is about, can we make this work? Can we, in the middle of nowhere, anywhere in the world, can we fix the engineering? And your team, Paul and Ian especially, heavily involved, and helped us say, okay, we can tick that box. We know we can connect that piece of equipment up, and it has to work. The customer, there's this beautiful technology under the bonnet, really, but it's to the customer. It's got to be completely invisible. It just has to work out of the box every time the customer wants to turn that product on. And that getting that bit right is essential, because then you build trust from your customers, and they start repaying. And then as they're repaying, we are profiling their ability to repay and the speed of repayment. And so, you're right. We suddenly started getting visibility of customers' ability to buy things on a pay-as-you-go basis that we previously just had made assumptions about. We had no idea. Although you could argue, that the telcos have been doing pay-as-you-go, as you know, for years, and in fact, across emerging economies, the pay-go model is really what brought people into telecom services. But then after a couple of years, we were looking at this growing base, and the penny dropped. Actually, they've just purchased some collateral for their household, and we can refinance it. So once they've paid it off, or paid almost all of it off, then suddenly we know they have an asset in their house or their small business which we can get visibility of. We know how they're using it, and of course, remember, we can turn it on and off. And then we were able to say, okay, well, we can relend against that product. So if they need a loan for school fees or a loan for their business, we can reset the credit level on the power system and offer them cash back to their M-PESA account.
So you're doing it through the device. So the device now becomes a hub, not just a home hub for aggregation of power, and we'll get into that. That's a big issue, not just in emerging markets, but all the way around the world. In fact, we recently recorded a podcast with an EV charging company about the race for the home hub through EV chargers and car batteries and whatever. But going back to that, you're now able, it's like the old, when I was growing up, the catalog guy would come and knock on the door and you're buying stuff on the net.
It's true. That's true.
Put everything off the catalog. Now it's called Amazon. But you're actually able to increase their credit limit because you've got credit history, so they can now buy more things, and it's all done through an IoT. It's a business model, but it's delivered to them through an IoT device. Yeah,
definitely. Two big levers: the digital payments and then connectivity through IoT. And those two things I think are huge levers when we think about new business models. And this led to 4R Digital, because M-KOPA is very much a consumer-facing business, and it's moved from.
So what happened next?
And then, then you start to explore that model even further, and you think, okay, well, what about all these value chains where there's inefficiency at the moment? And we touched on electric vehicles; they are perfect for IoT applications. Of course, they're complex. You've got a vehicle, you need a charging infrastructure, but if you've got data on how that ecosystem of elements within an electric vehicle work, then that data allows you, couple it with payments again, and you can start to think about pay-as-you-go models for electric vehicle usage. And so for me, that's hugely interesting, because electric vehicles and that sort of last mile delivery opportunity in emerging economies is going to be huge. And in Asia, we already see literally tens of thousands of EVs coming out every month. Africa's going to catch up. I think there's a big opportunity for electric vehicles in Africa, and we have to blend in some financing services alongside.
It won't work, will it? I mean, it's fine here. I'm sitting in my house in the UK. I have an EV charger in my garage, not far away from where I am, but I didn't have to worry. I paid for it when I bought the electric car, but I'm in a completely privileged position compared to people, the market that you're addressing, and unless you solve the credit and the business model, as you say, the technology adoption will fail, because the price of the cars can come
the affordability, that's right.
But still, you're saying, well, I don't want to. If I'm selling anything that's electrically powered that can connect to this hub or can be associated with this hub, I'm still worried about the credit risk of my customers. And so that taking because it's like a waterfall. I mean, the impression I'm getting is like a waterfall. You start with M-PESA, and then M-PESA sort of flowed into M-KOPA, and you realize what to do. And now M-KOPA is now flowing into another variation. It's mutating into a variation of another business model called 4R Digital. So what is it all about?
So 4R Digital is we're focusing more on business to business services. So if you think of these challenges that confronts many business value chains, in not the consumer one, I think is what we've tackled with M-KOPA is consumer access to clean energy, consumer appliances, including smartphones, which are now rocketing away because we can offer an affordable way to acquire a smartphone. But if you put that to one side, you've also got very inefficient sort of value chains. We've talked about mobility and vehicle usage, but if you think about agriculture's a key industry in a sector in right across Africa, and yet it's full of inefficiencies. And so if you think about bringing equipment into agricultural value chains that can improve efficiencies, either yield outputs from things like solar-powered water pumps and irrigation systems, that's quite expensive kit. But if I can connect it, monitor it, and finance it, it suddenly becomes a way to bring in productive equipment so we move more from a consumption model and M-KOPA type model towards a sort of productive use model. And I think that's what we're doing in 4R Digital. It's all about working with business clients to find opportunities to increase productivity through value chains where you bump up against these problems of expensive equipment and lack of financing.
So I'm now in a small village, or I'm in this town, and I want to have one of these expensive bits of equipment. I'm a business. And the reason I want that expensive bit of equipment is I want to build a business around it.
Exactly.
Now. And I want to sell the capabilities of that equipment. I've now extended the value chain, B2B to C.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the model morphs, I guess, doesn't it? I mean, I know you're just introducing this now. You've launched it. The model now morphs into. I think what you're saying is you can enable me to make a business out of a piece of equipment that previously I couldn't do.
That's right. Yeah.
Talk me through how that works.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think if we can find a way to allow the owner or operator of that equipment to earn money and increase their income, that's key. In what we're doing with M-KOPA, we're saving households money because we're taking what they would spend on kerosene, allowing them to buy a piece of equipment over a period of, say, 12 to 18 months. Yeah. And then their energy is free from that point on. And in fact, there's some great stats. M-KOPA's published an impact report, and it shows that we can save, a typical household will save hundreds of dollars because, through purchasing that solar energy equipment. And then once they purchased it, their energy use is free for as long as that product.
And they can basically purchase everything on the site. They can purchase their mobile phone.
Yeah, that's it. And they can
purchase their battery-powered fridge.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. Yeah. And it's a way of sort of making things affordable and actually saving money. On the productive side, so what we're doing in 4R Digital is exploring. It's still quite early stage. We literally incorporated it this year, which might go down in history as one of the craziest times to start a new business in COVID we're seeing at the moment. But it's about finding applications of the same model, but where you're allowing the owner or operator of the equipment to increase revenue. And so you can think about, we talked about agricultural systems. There's potentially ways to finance into electric vehicles. We think there if you think about small sort of informal retail outlets where you can start to think about things like water purification equipment. That's expensive, and yet there's a need for clean water. Quite expensive to create it sometimes. We can finance a way into that. So there's lots of opportunities. In fact, for me, it's very exciting. I think we're just about starting to realize what we can do with IoT when you couple it up with payments. And as I look ahead, and these aren't all emerging economy applications. It doesn't take a big imagination.
This innovation is going to start there and spread into more established economies. But again, I'm in this village, so I can really get it here. I want to run a business out of a water purification unit. It's an expensive item. I know I can now buy it from you, and in the way that it's sort of as a business, as an extension of the first model, I can buy it from you. But I guess what it means is my customers who are going to I'm going to sell these water purification services to, they can pay for my service with mobile money.
Yes, exactly.
So you actually, and that all goes through the system. So you've extended the model from a centralized model. You're now distributing it to a series of tens, hundreds of thousands, potentially, of hubs. So you're enabling businesses by saying, and not only will I enable you to acquire the equipment in the first place, but I'll enable you to sell services of that equipment to people who can pay you in the same model as you've already proven.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I do think if you, without getting too universal here, we're now used to buying our water from mains distribution systems, our power from high voltage distribution networks. If you were starting again, we would never design infrastructure that way. You wouldn't do it because it's hugely inefficient, very expensive. And yet in emerging economies, you've actually got, you don't have that incumbent infrastructure
leapfrog.
challenge. You can, yeah, and that phrase is often used. You can go straight to quite sort of light touch, much more bespoke, distributed models for many, many things. And if you've got the ability to move with digital finance to move money around, that's a whole series of barriers moved to one side. And then IoT brings you the visibility. You can look at equipment, you can monitor it, you can update it, you can run digital twins. So we're getting super interested in energy storage. Of course, is all about the performance of good quality batteries for energy storage. And you think about creating a digital twin where you can monitor performance, you can provide software updates, you can model performance of that energy storage over time, and then then you at some point you need to bring that back to the real world, and you can manage your energy storage business in a much smarter way because of connectivity and the ability to model things virtually before you need to spend the money of getting it fixed on the ground.
There's so many. One of the great things about this podcast series, when we started it to bring really interesting stories to the listeners, and this is a fabulous way, it's multiple stories. But I guess one thing certainly I didn't realize is the extent to which they would all start to connect together, because what you just said is almost word for word for a recent one that we recorded, which was with a EV charging company, PodPoint in the UK, and they were talking about the disintermediation of the EVSE, the EVSE industry, the electric vehicle supply, the industry for supplying electric into homes. And this point about, we've all had these relationships with a power company, a utility company, and the way the supply chain works. And now there's these emergence of these new intermediaries, and the idea of an aggregation hub in the home, which could be linked to your car, it could be linked to some solar panels, and whatever. And then the idea that you could use it to broker. You could actually have bids on there which says, who wants to sell me electricity today? Who wants to buy my excess electricity? Very quick bursts, during half time in a sports game when everybody puts the bet on the UK or whatever, makes the coffee in the US. But the idea of not disintermediating the supply chain and actually giving power to the user. Every single podcast we've done, when we look at the story, it always results in what IoT is not technology. Yes, there's some really hard technology problems you have to solve, and you talked about that, and we know that's the business we're in. But at the end of the day, they take off when you empower the user. The user takes control, and the user is taking control of their payments with M-PESA. The user is taking control of how they use electricity, and then can acquire products for the home, the fridge, the TV, the phone, and now the user is taking control. You're actually going to take control of their life by being able to set up in a business and enabling them to run a business. And as you say, that is not a model that's just confined to emerging markets.
No, not
it will arguably get adopted quicker in emerging markets because you don't have the legacy infrastructure. And I think
exactly
that's really interesting angle.
Yeah, and if we look at the big forces starting to get interested in this space, so we do a lot of work with Microsoft, and they can, if they envisage their future, you see obviously the growth of the cloud services model, but all this stuff that's happening at the edge of the cloud, and these distributed models. I mean, I think they're sensing that, as they're not the only ones, of course, but they're all sensing this opportunity that there are business models out there waiting to be created that utilize this technology well. But your point is a really good one. Unless you've got to stay focused on the consumer or the user. If it's a business user, you've got to either save the money or make the money. You've got to solve a problem somewhere for.
Otherwise, it's just the technology.
Otherwise, it's just the technology. Yeah, and we've seen, I'm sure you share this with your own professional history. We've seen people get too excited about the technology, and forget actually what's the application of this in the real world. And
exactly.
So we're, for our digital, we're trying to keep, let's keep our feet on the ground. Let's find 3 or 4 good applications of connectivity and payments, and work with partners to tease out all the hard bits, and then think about what the scale opportunity might be in the end. And I'm excited. I think it's been a dreadful year with as we know, all over the world with COVID. But if anything, if there's a silver lining anywhere, it has to be around the accelerated adoption of digital products and services, because we can do things differently, we can do things at lower cost and much more efficiently, but we need to step in and get our hands dirty on the hard bits to make these business models work properly. But it is possible.
It is possible and arguably fundamental. And just to finish, a couple of points. I mean, you mentioned Microsoft. I know that one of the things that we work with you is to get all this information into Azure. I think you're one of the largest Azure. This is one of the largest Azure implementations in Africa, I believe. So
yes, yeah.
And Tony Shakib, who runs a IoT globally for Microsoft, we're hoping to be a future guest on the podcast. So that will be very interesting from his perspective. But secondly, this issue of technology adoption in a downturn. I probably used this phrase before in a previous one, but something I learned in my career when Cisco and HP and startups is it's a Formula One analogy. You don't overtake on straights, you overtake on the corners. And technology adoption, when you look back, very definitely always accelerates in downturns.
Yeah.
And new companies, there's a direct correlation. I don't know the exact data, but somebody somewhere in business school has proved it. A very high proportion of the market leaders in technology, the waves of market leaders, were actually founded. You map them back; they were founded in downturns.
Yeah.
And of course, the reason for that is what you just said. The downturn puts so much focus on your costs, and it puts so much focus on you have to do something different. You can't just be a me-too product.
Yeah. True.
And what happens is that typically small companies say there is a completely new way of doing this. Like, I'm going to build the whole model around the user as opposed to from the brand to the user.
Yeah.
And I'm going to actually enable a brand new experience. And as a result of that, what happens is disruption is accelerated.
Yeah, I agree.
And so what you're seeing is that the overall market, if you look at the market share numbers and the total amount of money spent, seems to have come down to low single digits. But within that, the total amount of money spent on new implementations of new product is absolutely booming.
Yeah.
And it's invisible. You can't see it until suddenly it's too late and everyone says, well, I always knew this was going to be the model.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is easy to say, isn't it? Yeah. But
it is easy to say.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I agree. Is it necessity is the mother of invention, isn't it? And I think when we can, we know technically we can make these sorts of models work. And there are challenges there, and it's you've got to get the technology at the right cost. And as we were talking about earlier, it's got to work out of the box. And where you guys have helped us over the years on that is that's fundamental. You have to. Nothing's going to happen if the technology doesn't work, but you must stay focused on what's the need or the problem that I'm tackling. And and for me, I am an optimist. I think we are going to see the adoption of better business models that are more inclusive. And these can be for profit. We can do this. And
we should make it clear. You're not a registered. In case people are thinking you're a registered charity, no, you're a profitable established business.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's a possibly a longer game than we always. I think we sometimes think things will happen super quickly. They don't happen that quickly, but but when they do happen, I think the magnitude of the impact they can have can be massive. And we've seen, certainly I've had the privilege of working with brilliant teams on M-PESA and on M-KOPA, and I look forward. I can see some really exciting new opportunities, and they take working out. They don't fall out of the sky.
Yes, that's right.
Work, yeah. But given the year we've had, I'm still an optimist for this stuff. I think this. We know there are better ways to do things, and we can use technology to our advantage to find profitable paths into some of those new business models.
So, Nick, I think it's a wonderful story. I'm sure the listeners have loved it. I want to thank you for it, and not just the story, and clearly a big partner of ours at Eseye, but making a real life, tangible contribution to people's lives. There's quite a few IoT case studies out there where it's hard to get the human angle story. It's definitely not hard to get the human angle story. It's changing people's lives for the better, and it's a wonderful thing, and shows the true potential of IoT on a global basis. And there's lots of stories like that out there, particularly good ones. So I just want to thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
And wish you well. I know we're going to see if we can help you on the next stage of your journey, which is tremendously exciting. And I would just say to the listeners, I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, this is the IoT Leaders podcast. If you have any feedback or inputs of what you'd like to hear, stories, then please, you can contact us directly at iotleaders@eseye.com. Having listened to this, you probably more want to reach out to Nick, and I'm sure you can find Nick on LinkedIn and through the
sure. Always happy to talk about this stuff. And look, and thanks, Nick, for inviting me on. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure we're gonna do more stuff together.
I think we're going to do some great stuff together for the benefit of not just our companies, but much more importantly for the benefit of society. I mean, it does fill my heart when I talk about what type of customers we got. I often say, well, I can tell you about a business case study, but let me tell you what we're doing for people in Africa that don't have access to the grid or don't have a bank account. And that people they love hearing about that for obvious reasons. So just so everybody knows, at M-KOPA, in case people are hearing this and thinking, oh, how to do that, it's M-KOPA.
That's it. Yep.
And the new company is
4R Digital. We're
Digital.
4rdigital.com, and we're big believers in the fourth revolution. So 4R is a there's a if you don't know much about the fourth revolution, have a look at it. But it's all about we move in these industrial cycles.
Industry 4.0 and
that's it.
And it's just great case studies, great content, great example of taking complex problems and bringing them to life through technology, IoT, changing business models and disrupting value chains. It was all in there. So with that, I think we'll leave it here. Thank you again. We'll talk soon. Thank you to our listeners for listening to this episode of IoT Leaders. Thanks.
Thank you.